Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I am speaking on zakat not as an academic subject, but as a long enduring issue of misguidance on zakat. This misguidance seems to be going on and on with no end in sight, as if it is going to be made perpetual, generation after generation, centuries after centuries. But in the meantime, in our community, deaths continue to occur individually in the state of surrender to this misguidance. And therefore, in the state of the sinning of the denial of the zakat dues to the poor. And it's obvious because we all are not paying zakat in our lifetime. In the last 3 years, I have been speaking to groups of people, brothers and sisters, locally and abroad. And I'm pleased to say that by the grace of Allah, I have been able to get a number of families to begin to pay zakat. Not only that, some have even paid their past zakat. And furthermore, even still more, some have paid zakat that was calculated as due on their parents who are long dead. There is a hope that these very families who have started paying zakat, they have also started advising others to do the same. So the awakening is catching up among those who still have the independence of their critical thinking and reasoning. Time being limited, what I propose to do is to present snippets, that is, pieces of information on various aspects of zakat, of the obligation of zakat, so as to be able to cover the presentation with minimal time possible. And I can also be brief and precise. So in the course of these pieces of information, it should not come to us as a surprise that there were some informations that we never knew about before, right? Because we were never led to know about it before. So, to start, I'm starting now with these pieces of information which I call as snippets. There are more than 100 verses in the Quran which mention zakat. And in some verses, there is a linkage of zakat to salat, aqimus salata or atu zakata. There is no obligation in furu'edin, there is no wajibat in furu'edin that has as many verses of the Quran as zakat. But then 100 verses, even one verse should have been sufficient for us, and yet 100 verses, and we never pay the zakat in our entire life. What's the reason? It might as well have been even 200 verses. That would have made no difference. But the Quran has the answer. The Quran says, Bayinat means verses of the Quran, translated as communications of Allah, which are the verses of the Quran. Allah warns in the Quran that there are those who reject the verses of the Quran, the Bayinat. And there are those who dispute and there are those who conceal, and there are those who disbelieve, and there are those who distort, and there are those who dislike a version. There are verses in respect of each behavior, in respect of each reaction that I have mentioned. I have got references, but there is no time at the moment to give the references of the verses. But, brothers and sisters, there is one verse which is very much scaring, extremely scaring for us who do not pay zakat in our entire lifetime. And that verse is chapter 39, verse 59. Allah warns in this verse, those who reject the communication of Allah are unbelievers, which means those who do not pay zakat because they reject the communication, the verses of the Quran, they are unbelievers. And man asdaqu min Allahi qila, who can be truer than Allah in his word? Now let us come to hadith. There is hadith from the Prophet in Mustadrakul Wasail, and there is hadith of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam in Wasail Shia, specifically mentions those who do not pay zakat ceases to become Muslim, or they say are not Muslims. I've got the references here. We must understand one thing, that while salat and zakat are in furu'id and they are obligations, but there is a difference between the two. Salat is for the sake of Allah, and Allah says He's not needy. He is not needy of our salat. But zakat is for the poor. They are needy of their dues. And therefore, obviously, those who miss salat, they can still be forgiven before death. But those who miss zakat, worse, never pay zakat in their lifetime, they should never expect forgiveness from God, from Allah, because it is in the context of haqqun nas, and Allah is just. Now, let us brace ourselves for the naked fact, or it might as well be a stubborn fact. If it is unthinkable that a Muslim should be offering no namaz at all in his lifetime, it's unthinkable. And yet, we don't find it as unthinkable that there are people, there are Muslims who do not pay zakat in their entire lifetime. Very strange. There is something we must always remember and keep remembering, that no Hajj is acceptable where debts owed to the people have not been settled. But strangely, people go for Hajj expecting acceptance when the worst debt ordained by Allah as zakat has never been settled, paid in lifetime. And there is one thing even more. The poor people, in the course of denial of the rights of their zakat due to them, in desperation of poverty, by sheer desperation of poverty, they may, in the matter of life, commit sins because they are desperate. And if sins are committed because of livelihood, then those who deny them their dues of zakat, in addition to the sin of not paying zakat, they share the sin of those poor people who commit sins as a result of the denial of that zakat. Nabi Isa alayhi salam spoke in defense of his chaste mother. The people would not believe that a baby could ever speak. And they thought, if he did speak, then each word that he would utter would be valuable like gold. And he spoke. Among the words that he spoke, he made a mention of zakat. Imagine. Just imagine. It is in the verse, chapter 19, verse 31. Among those momentous words, one word was zakat. Besides, Allah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Mu'min, narrates in the Quran the sifat of muflihun, the character, the attribute of the one who is successful in life. And one of the sifat that is mentioned, such a person is regular in the payment of his zakat. Now, this is a thing that we have to ponder about. Further, Allah says in the verse, chapter 9, verse 18, that those establishing mosque, those who is doing maintenance of mosque should be paying zakat and are regular in zakat. So we must remember, electing anybody, nominating anybody, or appointing anybody as a trustee of a mosque, if he's not paying zakat, he is not eligible to hold that position. How generous is Allah? Allah promises 4 benefits to those who pay zakat regularly. One is salvation and success for the soul. Another one, no fear or grief after death. Third, multiplication of wealth. And the fourth, glad tidings for the hereafter. I have all the references of the verses in respect of what I'm saying now. And we must also remember, if there is a misguidance, then even that misguidance has to have a limit. Our intelligence must not be insulted. We should never be told that charity is a part of zakat or charity is a substitute for zakat. There is this verse, chapter 2, verse 177. It distinguishes between zakat and charity. Now, having reached to this stage, not paying zakat, one doesn't have even to go to the school to know. Anybody who's not paying zakat is usurping the money owed to the poor. Anybody who does not pay zakat, he is in fact stealing the money that does not belong to him, but belongs to the poor. And yet, he uses that money as if it is his own money. This is a terrible sinning. And then we must know also, see the absurdity of not paying zakat. See the lunacy, madness of not paying zakat when the rate is so small. The rich does not become less rich by paying zakat, but the poor becomes less and less poor on every occasion he receives zakat. Now the question is loud and clear. If zakat is wajib in Furu'id-Din, how then we never pay any zakat in our entire life while we see poverty keeps widening and deepening around us? What is the answer? Allah has given us a dose of wisdom. We can't be so dumb that we don't have the answer. And yet we don't have the answer. But there is the answer now. The answer is in the verse, chapter 100, verse 8. Human greed, hers. Any Muslim who is committed to Islam truly would never succumb to the greed. And if anybody is subdued by greed to the extent of stealing the money of the poor and using it as his own, he can never be regarded as a normal human being, let alone Muslim. Now, this greed has its own psychosis, mental illness. And we could as well say that this psychosis is to all who do not pay zakat. What is the psychosis? The psychosis is a man would readily believe as true what he knows for sure. Allah Qasam is not true because he likes it to be true and he looks for the blind following as a crutch to satisfy himself that it is true. Zakat is not wajib on this wealth that we have. Now we come to a very, very sensitive stage of presentation. How is it that the denial of zakat so obligatory, but we deny the poor their dues of zakat with impunity and without fear of Allah? Why? And unfortunately, this is more peculiar among the Shia Isnashris. Whereas there is another Shia sect, I won't name it, they are regular in zakat payment, and they have all fixed the month of Ramadan as the annual calculation for zakat. When I was in madrasa as a student, ending as a madrasa teacher graduate, and when I was volunteering part-time madrasa teacher, I thought at that time that it was very strange that the wealth of our time on which zakat is payable should be the cattle, the crops, and the gold coins. Very strange. And therefore, because we don't have a wealth in those three commodities, zakat in a matter of practicality, to make it practicable, compliable, it becomes nullified because we don't have that wealth. And yet we are rich. And yet we can buy those cattle, we can buy crops, we can buy gold coins. But that says, no, you are not rich. I'll give an example. I used to give one example. I gave this example in Toronto. I was invited to speak on zakat at Baraza Group housing complex. I said, if I have cattle, if I have crops, if I have gold coins, and with me it remains for 1 year, so zakat is wajib. If zakat is wajib. But supposing the same cattle that I have, the same crops that I have, the same gold coins I have, I sell them and I bank the proceeds of the sale, then zakat is not wajib. Strange. I won't go further. But the hearts blind and deaf. Let me give you another example. Let us take Zakatul Fitra. See, there is no reconciliation. Zakatul Fitra is due on the staple food that you consume, and Zakatul Fitra accordingly is paid in kind, depending upon what staple food you were consuming. Then how is it that we can now pay Zakatul Fitra in equivalence of shillings, monetary form? How can you reconcile this? Another example which I gave, the fuqaha who receive their remuneration under a contract for the services rendered by them, they bank it. They hold cash in their hands. They spend. And the excess, they save it. Now when the excess, they save it. Can I tell them, that's not it's not wealth. That is not wealth. Zakat it doesn't attract zakat. Throw it away. Will he throw it away? No, because it is wealth. Now, perhaps I should end here by saying that we do need to follow. We as a layman cannot claim that we don't need following. We need following, but Allah warns. I put verses of the Quran that the following should not be total and blindly. Every soul will bear its own burden. No soul will bear the burden of another. There will be no game of blaming each other after death. Wa alaikum assalam. Wassalamu ala man ittaba'al huda.